Welcome everyone to Venture Out Events. How do tech transfer services support science to deliver value? And what pathways can scientists explore to bridge their innovations from lab to market? Today, we will take on these questions and more with special guest, Oxford University Innovation. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Steele, supporting innovation ecosystem engagement through the Alliance and CGIAR's Accelerate for Impact platform. This event is brought to you by the Accelerate for Impact platform, a venture space that builds on CGIAR's legacy of research and innovation to co-design, accelerate, and fund science-based innovations to address some of the world's most pressing challenges at the nexus of agriculture, environment, and health. Venture Out events are a series of interactive webinars where guests from the innovation ecosystem, including leading startups, ventures, and tech transfer experts, showcase their success stories of bridging research ideas from lab to market. Venture Out aims to encourage learning and connection amongst innovators, highlight synergies and pathways for value creation with CGIAR research, and further inspire the entrepreneurial mindset and market-oriented approach among CGIAR's scientists. Our event today will dive into the world of technology transfer for agriculture. Oxford University Innovation will showcase how tech transfer can aid scientists to navigate commercialization, connect scientists with collaborators for open innovation and scaling, manage intellectual property, and much more. Our guests, Oxford University Innovation is a subsidiary of the University of Oxford with the mission to enable the university community to maximize the global impact of its research and expertise. It works as a gateway for academics and researchers to commercialization, patenting and licensing services, spin-off formation and consulting, and proactively develops new business and partnership opportunities. Joining us from Oxford is Simon Warner, Head of Licensing and Ventures for the Life Sciences. Following Simon's presentation, we will welcome intellectual property specialist David Rodriguez Machado from the Alliance and CGIAR for an interactive discussion about ag tech transfer, and close with some remarks from CGIAR's Senior Director of Private Partnerships for Impact, Remy Bouton. We are here to explore the different pathways for research toward value creation and gain some insight into what sets apart the innovations that succeed in making an impact beyond the lab. So without further ado, I'll now hand it over to Simon Warner from Oxford University Innovation.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for that great introduction. Hello, everybody that's listening today. So yeah, I'm Simon Warner. I'm Head of Licensing and Ventures at Oxford University Innovation. But for almost a geological age, it seemed I worked for a large ag company, Syngenta. So I spent some time working in ag biotech and in agriculture in general. And I've also worked in startups and spin-outs as well. So I've done all sorts, really. But now, for the past 2 years, I head up licensing and ventures here at Oxford University. So I'll share some slides, and then we'll get into a discussion, I think, after. Hopefully, you can see the slides. All right. So as Megan actually did sort of describe Oxford University Innovation's mission. So of course, Oxford University, it's a research and teaching establishment primarily. But what happens in that process is innovations occur, intellectual property is created, and solutions to the world's problems can actually start in universities. Actually, they can start anywhere, but they could definitely start at universities. And then what we try and do is make sure that we connect the right people and make sure that those innovations make a difference to the planet and the people on the planet. And just like your organization, it's about impact for us. You know, that's the first and foremost thing that we think about in the universities. How do we actually maximize impact? And the financial side of it is secondary. So this is something that probably a lot of people know. Oxford University is an old university, so it's almost 900 years old. It's a big university. It performs well across the globe, and often ranks very highly. And in medical sciences, it ranks really quite highly indeed. In terms of Oxford University Innovation, well, we're not quite as old as the 900-year parent organization that we come from. We were formed in 1987, and we were formed really to help the academics and researchers commercialize results and the innovations that they were making. We actually do an awful lot of work, really. We, in terms of patent applications, we file a lot of patent applications, and we're the 6th highest UK patent application organization in the UK. Even in the EU, we're the highest ranked university in terms of patent applications, and the 32nd highest worldwide, probably only surpassed by the country that Megan comes from, and China, actually. I mean, there's a lot of work going on in China. Roughly, the Oxford University Innovations roughly supports 3 different areas. So we support licensing and ventures, and that's what I do, and the team that I work with. And our business is essentially associated with licensing intellectual property and patents, forming spin-outs. We also take care of material sales for materials that could be produced by the university and the academics. We take care of clinical outcomes and questionnaires relating to that. But the other pieces of work that we do is to actually make sure that the spin-outs or startups actually are supported through that process. They get the funding they need, the investment they need, and we try and do our best to get them on a really good footing. And we also support the hospitals, the Oxford hospitals as well. Consulting services is another area where Oxford University Innovation supports academics. So if the academics want to do some consulting, or there's companies that wish to use academics as consultants or technical experts, we manage that. And we also manage the spin-out and investment post-creation, which is a separate department that really takes care of investment management. And indeed, Oxford University has got funds that we invest in our own in our own enterprises and spin-outs, as well as attracting large venture capital and corporate venture funding for those spin-outs. Just as a little snapshot on some of the things we achieved in 2022, it'll give you a flavor of the sort of volume of work that we manage. And we have around 5,000 patents under management. Typically, in a year, we will actually execute somewhere between a couple of hundred and 300 license deals, which are really important to us. And in fact, in 2022, we executed 894 license deals. We managed 531 different consultancy agreements. We created we created just under 30 companies, spin-outs, new companies, social ventures as well. And overall, the spin-outs and the enterprises that we created themselves, they attracted an additional sort of 30.4 million in income that we brought into the university, of which we could return 13.2 million back to the university. With the spin-outs, they go through a life cycle, and ultimately what those spin-outs are aiming to do is to be bought, acquired, or merge with a company, so that those investments are realized. It also helps with the process of actually taking the innovation to patients, for example, or to the field in agriculture. And typically we get two or three of those a year. Mirabio, for example, actually was acquired last year for 405 million pounds, a proportion of which comes back to the university. I'll explain how that works later. So, do we license or do we spin out? So my part of the organization is all about licensing or ventures or spin outs. I think licensing is a really great way to go, because licensing basically allows you to license intellectual property or the innovation to a large company that's established. So in terms of agriculture, it would be your Bayers, your Syngentas, your Cortevas, perhaps. And we know that they've got everything it really takes to get the regulatory approvals, the ability to manufacture, distribute, sell, and to make a difference. And those license agreements will actually allow Oxford to make that impact that it's looking for, but also return license revenues. Large companies, though, actually don't like to take risks. So generally, they will look for opportunities that are pretty well developed and sometimes a substantial way through the regulatory process. But if you get a license, you know you are going to have a partner, most likely with a large company, that will be able to realize that innovation. And the return of the revenues that big company will make come through things like signing fees, milestone success payments, sales royalties, or milestones on successful regulatory approvals, or even sales threshold approvals as well. And I suppose one of the poster child projects or pieces of work from Oxford, which Oxford is now really quite famous for, is the AstraZeneca vaccine, so the COVID vaccine. That actually made huge impact across the planet. It's still the lowest cost vaccine available globally. 3 billion doses have been delivered, and roughly 6.3 million lives have been saved for that. And it did return significant income back to the university, so that the revenue sharing has been fair in that case. What do you do, though, if your technology is not ready to be licensed directly to a large company? Well, there it might make sense if the work is earlier stage, it's a little bit more risky, and the academics have got an appetite to become founders. You can form a spin-out. Spin-out would be a small company. We would license the intellectual property to that small company to start off with. It would then seek venture funds, or further investment from corporate venture, or just private equity. And what the people or the organizations that provide that funding get in return is they get an equity stake in that spin out. And that equity stake actually is in proportion to the level of investment that they make. Often there are multiple levels of investment. And through those levels of investment, most equity is diluted with each round. And the way it works with the university, and actually perhaps Oxford University, is a little bit atypical here. We have some fairly transparent rules. We also are very unique in the fact that we even publish the terms of framework of the license agreements we have. No other tech transfer office that I know publishes those. And the reason we do it is for that transparency, and so that founders and investors alike can see what the template agreements look like. So Oxford University, before any investment comes in, Oxford University will take 20% of the equity of the company, leaving 80% for the founders. And then as the subsequent investors come in, they take equity in proportion to their investment. Pretty often, well, always, the university's equity position is diluted through the funding rounds, as quite often we are not able to invest at the same levels as the external investors can. And if people are interested, there's a link in here, but you can find it on Google. If you just Google OUI spin out license, you will find that license. Of course, investment's really key, because an idea in the lab needs money to actually take it out of the lab, perhaps do early stage field work in the case of agriculture, or prove it works in the glass house, or early stage field work, later stage field work. The costs rack up, and then you're going through regulatory processes looking at the safety, the efficacy, the environmental safety, and without funding, basically those spin-outs wouldn't be able to grow. We're quite lucky in Oxford in that we have a very close association with Oxford Science Enterprises, who basically are investors that have managed to raise over $1 billion of investment to purely invest in Oxford spin-outs and Oxford companies. The effect of this was actually seen on this. It's a very busy slide, but essentially what this is a timeline of when all the startups, or well, all the spin-outs from Oxford University were formed, you know, going back to 1999, it looks like here, you know, all the way to present day, although we haven't got all our new ones on there. And you can see in the early days, you know, 2 or 3 spin-outs would have seemed good initially, but in 2015, once Oxford Science Enterprises became established and attracted that amount of investment, the rate of company formation accelerated dramatically. In terms of the whole portfolio now, we've pretty much formed nearly 300 new ventures, as well as actually, you know, creating value and impact through bigger license deals. I've listed a few different companies that have come out of Oxford University. Some of them you can see are actually, well, it's very broad, which you probably expect. You know, they're not all biology. I take care of life science, which, you know, we have a lot of medical science division companies or companies in medical science, but also in physical science, we have companies that have innovated in nuclear fusion energy, electric motors, you know, things that will actually hopefully make big differences to the planet in the future. On ag, I'm going to highlight 3 companies in terms of this sort of area of agriculture. So Moa Technology was formed in 2018 from the biology department. It's actually now becoming a reasonably mature company. It closed a Series B of 44 million investment. And what they've done is got a very unique novel platform to accelerate the discovery of new herbicides. And so I'm sure a lot of you will know herbicide discovery actually really slowed down pretty much from the 1980s onwards. And it's been a long time since the last herbicides really were innovated and new modes of action were found for those herbicides to work on. So this is what Moa are trying to do, is create new herbicides. And my understanding now is they've got lead candidates at least going into glasshouse trials. Wild Bioscience is a very new company. It was only formed in 2021. It's a Series A investment stage. It has technology using genetics, essentially, that has been designed to increase plant performance, increase yield, and it's broadly applicable across multiple crops. And lastly is one that is actually really close to my heart, because I was the chief scientific officer of this company for, I think, about 5 years, really. And it's Oxitec. And Oxitec is a short form of Oxford Insect Technologies. And at Oxitec, they basically pioneered in insect control, again, using genetic approaches, biological approaches, to control essentially insects that in 2 different classes, you know, sort of mosquitoes that spread diseases, pretty bad diseases such as malaria, dengue, and Zika. You know, mosquitoes now have become pretty resistant to a lot of the applied pesticides to try and control them, and new solutions really need to be found. But also there are agricultural pests, and Oxitec is also active in agricultural pests, looking to control things like fruit flies, which damage fruits, and also more recently, something that I was very closely involved in is the control of fall armyworm. And fall armyworm is, you know, really pretty devastating crop pest that attacks multiple crops and can really cause a lot of damage and threatens food security. especially in low to middle income countries. Now, this pest, unfortunately, now has become resistant to nearly all the pesticides that are applied against it, and also the biotech insect control traits. And Oxtec's more than mature. It was actually acquired in 2015 for $160 million by Intrexon. And again, part of that revenue was realized by the university, which still held a small equity stake in Oxitec. And this is the last slide, and Megan kindly sort of talked about what the mission of OUI is, but really this last slide is our vision, and we want to be, and I think we are, a world-leading innovation ecosystem with of course Oxford University at its heart, because we serve Oxford University, but the aim of Oxford University is to create global impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, for such an interesting talk. I can see so many ways that scientists and innovators, especially those from CGIAR, can draw inspiration from the work of Oxford University Innovation and these aspects of tech transfer. So I'd just like to quickly remind our audience, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function. Pose some questions for the panel or some interesting considerations you'd like to explore further, share your own thoughts, and take this opportunity to join the conversation. And remember, stay tuned throughout the discussion to hear final thoughts at the end about private partnerships for impact. So now I'd like to welcome onto the panel David Rodriguez Machado from the Alliance and CGIAR. David, as a specialist in intellectual property, I'd love to hear your initial reflections on this presentation and the work of tech transfer for agriculture.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Megan, for inviting me to this very inspiring webinar. I also want to thank Simon for your time, for the presentation, for joining us. It is a privilege to have you here and having at firsthand all your experience working as part of an organization as Oxford University with such remarkable outcomes, with so much research impact in such various fields. I think your presentation is very enriching for our organization, for all the CG system. It really inspires us. It gives us a lot of our ideas on how to work, how to move forward. And I think Oxford University and this spin, this kind of subsidiary company that was created, Oxford University Innovation Limited, it's a great example of how can you really properly manage your IP rights, all the research that is done by your researchers, and how to really use it in a way that you can generate impact through research. It's a great example for us. And I would like to ask you a first question and give you a little bit of a background here. And is that we are, a research and development organizations that our main goal, is to generate impact. We have some target beneficiaries, which are farmers in developing countries, and those are the ones that where we are, generating all our research. We want to go there, and when we are thinking about who are we partnering with, we are always keeping in mind how can we really have an impact on those target beneficiaries. So we always try to seek for a partner that is aligned with our mission, that we are always seeking a partner in which such partnership can really generate an impact. So my first question would be, what kind of considerations do you usually take into account when you are choosing a partner?
So actually, I can probably answer this in the context of Oxford University innovation, but also probably from the experience I've had in previous companies. So yeah, helping farmers feed the world, really, really important. And the types of partners, ultimately, you want partners whose goals and missions align with yours. Now, the good news is in agriculture, I think most of the big companies' goals do align with your goals too. But the difficulty is, which I mentioned before, is those big companies, they tend to be a little bit risk averse, and they'll be looking to perhaps leverage other philanthropic funding. And I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation support you, because they should and they do. And they basically allow the sort of sums of money and investment and help that's required to sometimes take those brilliant ideas at an early stage through at least to the point where they have been demonstrated in glasshouse field trials, at which point, and I know this is the Gates Foundation aims, is that the bigger corporations that then required to move things forward show interest, and the government bodies as well. So basically the governments themselves have got missions to make sure that the world is fed and food security is protected. Different countries have different levels of ability to do that. In the end, I think the other thing that is quite important is that those ideas, they are not just impactful, but they hold their own in terms of they do make a beneficial difference to the farmers and the growers, because the farmers and the growers, they need to make a living. And they need to grow crops that not only sustain the world, but actually also enable them to sustain their families and their communities. So it's the whole, looking at the whole life cycle, it's important to bear in mind that some commercial aspects is actually necessary. We couldn't license any of our technology to somebody on a basis where the idea was to make no money, because we know our licensees, they need to make money. So these are the types of things that I'm sure you're doing already, and that we think about as well in Oxford.
Thank you, Simon. I'd love to just call in a first question that we're receiving in the Q&A. And this really focuses in on how we can go about monetizing or commercializing our work while still ensuring that the diffusion of our IP and the public interest, as we're bound to make our research advances at CGIAR in the benefit of certain beneficiaries, especially growers, especially developing countries. So what are some thoughts on this?
So patents sometimes get a really bad name. Intellectual property gets a really bad name. And really it shouldn't, because the idea of patents and intellectual property is that you share and publish the technology so that people know about it, that you're not hiding it as a secret. And of course, one of the things that is true, though, is before you filed a patent, it's not wise to let people know what it is, because they could just go and copy it. And then it's very difficult to actually at least use patent protection. There are other methods of protecting intellectual property, but patents is one of the main routes. But once you filed that patent, which is actually quite a simple process, you just basically sketch out what the idea is. The patent attorney will give you some idea of whether they think it's actually properly inventive, whether you stand a chance of actually getting a granted claims from your patent. They'll give you some idea of that fairly early on. But even if you've got very early data proving what the idea is that you have, proving that it works, proving it has a benefit, proving it's commercially applicable, proving it's novel, proving that you couldn't just figure it out because it's obvious, that process can be really quite fast. Once you've filed the patent, then you can publish. You can go You can talk about it, you can publish academic journals, you can go to conferences, you can share the idea. So in some ways, actually, the whole idea about patents is it is encouraging people to share. And of course, our academics in Oxford, that's what they have to do. They have to publish their research. They have to talk about it because that's their job. So it's not all bad. That's what I'm trying to say. But patents are actually a good thing because it encourages sharing. But at the same time, it allows you then to actually have some property that you can control a monopoly on. Essentially, patents allow you a monopoly, but you can agree to whatever license terms you like with that piece of intellectual property. You can exclusively license it to one company. You could non-exclusively license it to many in return, perhaps for less revenue if it's non-exclusive. You could license it to one party in one field, license it, and when I say a field, I'm talking about a field of technology, not a green field. You could license in different territories. So there's many different ways that you can choose as the holder of that intellectual property on what you want to do to actually make sure that you get a fair return on the work that you have put in as an inventor.
Simon, I wanted to take advantage of some of your comments in the reply, because as in Oxford, where all your academics, have the need to publish, in our organizations, we have an open access policy. We want to be as open as possible with all our research. We want it to be available to everyone. But of course, in some cases, these could have problems when you are thinking about filing a patent application, because there are some legal requirements that we have to comply in the case of novelty and demonstrating, that we have a real invention over here, that it's something real new. So how do you do, do you have like a tension between how the publications are handled? Do you have some guidelines or guiding principles within the university on the terms of what can you publish and the timings, kind of the content that you want to disclose in these early publications, or how do you handle it? So you don't affect a future patent application.
Yes, so you're right. So yeah, good point, and you know about this one as well. Is that so? You're right. Publication, including, of course, the patents that publish themselves, can and will be potential prior art of something that you might want to invent in I don't know, 6 months' time, 9 months' time, or in the future. So one of the things that we take into account and keep in our mind is well, what is the long-term view here? And of course, we would advise academics if we think that a publication that they want to make could damage the invention or a subsequent patent filing. So we would advise them. But interestingly, what we can't do, because the university is the university, we can only advise. We can't tell people what to do, and we don't. So sometimes the academics will hear our advice and decide what they want to do anyway. Mostly, they have a vested interest and want to make sure that they do the right thing. So of course, they if we ask them not to publish with good reasons, they'll take that into account and not publish. But again, generally the idea is to get, as soon as you can and it's safe to do so, and you know what your intellectual property strategy is, whether it's a single application or you're likely to have subsequent filings or new idea or build on that idea. It's just being able to manage that in a sensible way, and you'll have to do the same in your organization, even though you have this open innovation and collaborative policy.
Great, thank you. I think we'll sort of shift gears a little bit to discussing what sort of tech transfer services there are when not actively pursuing a patent, or perhaps at a different stage of ideas. So we're having some questions here in the chat from Abdul Ghaffar, from Emily, asking about expanding into different countries, what services are there, perhaps finding new partners for supporting a project. How does tech transfer services come in to help innovators in these stages?
So tech transfer, I mean, basically we can take care. So I'll talk about some things other than patents in just a second, but we can take care basically of intellectual property pretty much globally. Any tech transfer can. And your organization will be able to do that. Now, of course, the question that you always have to ask yourself is, why am I filing a patent in any particular country? What's the reason? What are the business reasons? What am I trying to protect in that country? And sometimes to get protection, you may not need to file the patent in every single country where that invention is worked, manufactured. It may be sufficient to just pick 2 or 3 major ones. But there are other routes for protecting intellectual property. And some of those other routes are things like copyright. Now, copyright doesn't have the same cost that patenting does. It's way cheaper. It also lasts a lot longer. It's 70 years, I believe, after the death of the person that has the copyright. So it's a long time. But it doesn't cost very much to get that. Now, copyright, it's useful for software, for example. It's also useful for, well, I know it's used in the music industry a lot. It's used, it's got different uses. Now, the other thing that I believe is, and is not very often talked about, the other way to protect or have barriers to entry if you really don't want others to try and follow you, copy you, is actually the registry system. And not many people do talk about this. So to get a product or a process registered, quite often the regulatory authorities have got, they've got a process that you have to follow. You have to show a lot of data that proves that whatever you have works in the way that you're saying it works. It's got the efficacy that you say that you say it has, that it works in different scenarios. So for crop products, for example, you've got to be able to show it works in multiple locations and multiple years. So it's not just a flash in the pan and it worked once in one field and you get registration. You also need to provide information and dossiers to show that it's safe. And then if you get that, basically the regulators are saying, okay, you can, basically they never say you approve, but they say, we've got no more questions to ask you. You can move ahead, but we may come back and ask more questions later. But those pieces of information and know-how and knowledge are pretty useful in themselves. And other companies may not have the ability to go down that route, and indeed won't hold those data packs, right, that the company or the organization that's developed, they won't have those. So in terms of protecting ideas, inventions, and if you want to, it's not all about intellectual property. There are other routes.
David, what are your reflections on this?
Well, I think that I totally agree with Simon on his analysis on that there are multiple ways to protect our research. There are multiple ways to have always keeping in mind having an impact. We gotta see which is the better legal tool that we have in each particular case to define what's the best protection depending on the exact needs that we have. It really depends on the type of innovation that we have, what has been created, and what we want to do with it. For example, just to mention, if it's a new incredible variety of bean or rice, then we like for
Oh, yeah.
example, copyrights could not be the best pathway, but
You
we
have
may
plant
analyze.
variety protection, don't you, in that
Yes.
case?
Yes, we have the plant variety protection, but depending on what we want to protect about the a special crop or the new variety that we developed, we could also think that a patent of invention, it's a good pathway. For example, trademarks in here could not be the best pathway, but at the same time, we are a research organization. We are a nonprofit organization. We are very open access. So, for example, in some industries, having trade secrets could be the best pathway, not in others. So I think it's something that you got to analyze on a case-to-case basis, depending on your asset and what you want to do with it.
Those are great points. I'd like to call on another question from the Q&A. Mark is asking, how do you prioritize the potential of different innovations and try to focus on ones that maybe have more potential to scale, to make the best use of resources and time? Certainly, this is a good problem to have too many innovations to decide where to place resources, but it's certainly an important consideration.
It is. It's a real life situation we have, because it probably won't surprise you that we have a lot of ideas, inventions that come through our office from Oxford University, because it's so big. And generally the way we go about it is, we are about impact, right? So we have that first and foremost, but we also know that the cost of protecting, the idea or the invention, it's got a significant cost. And actually, the other thing we make clear is, if you want to, with the academics, if you just want to make impact, you may not even need to be talking to us. You could publish a paper, you could share your idea, and somebody else will move it forward. So it only makes sense to talk to us when we know it does have a commercial potential, because even though Oxford University doesn't think about that first and foremost, our licensees definitely will be thinking about that. So what we do really is impact first, but then we'll prioritize on, well, what are the opportunities that give us the highest impact and have got the best opportunities for making financial return. It's not uncommon for us to have ideas where you're looking for things to say, well, looking for proof points in the market to say, oh, we could probably value this, we could work out what the value will be. But if it's something really, really new, that's very difficult. But we do actually try and put together at least a rough business case and a route to market, and make sure that the inventors, the academics, the founders know how, basically understand that. And in the case of the spin outs, that actually those academic founders or founders have good ideas themselves about their route to market. And we do say no. So if there are some things that come across our desk and we know that we'll never be able to get a market return, or we'll have a real struggle going to market, or the regulatory situation is impossible, we basically just let people know that, what the analysis was that we did and how we got to those conclusions. And, we are at that point, we're not obliged to continue trying to move something forward that just isn't going to ever make it in the commercial world.
Simon, I have a question that applies either to the model of licensing or the model of the spin-out companies that you create, and it's about how do you value your IP rights and your assets? Because I think that's one of the major problems that you can usually encounter when you are thinking about partnering with someone or giving a license, because in our case, for example, we have so many years of research. We have so many know-how involved. For example, in the development of a crop, of a new variety, we invest a lot of years, and there's a very huge portion of money that has been invested by our donors, by our founders. But our funders. So how do you value that asset? How do you really come to a fair price, something, you know, that it's reasonable for, you know, going out to the market?
Yeah. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. It's easy when, for example, you know that the intellectual property or the invention, you know what that is. So, you know, the example, I suppose, the easy one is, well, what's a COVID vaccine worth? Well, we knew what it was worth. We knew what it was likely to cost to make it. We also knew what sort of price we wanted to get. And actually, Oxford University is, again, somewhat unique in what we did there. We actually, in the agreement, we set it so that huge profits could not be made, that we actually defined what the price could be in relation to the cost. Obviously, Pfizer vaccines and other companies, they could charge whatever price they wanted. So that was but that was easy. We knew what that would be worth, and we knew quite a lot about vaccines. But let's take a spin out. For example, like Moatech, who are trying to develop new herbicides. Well, we know globally, what is it, around global crop protection market, 60 billion. I forget exactly which chunk of that is herbicides, but probably somewhere between 15 and 20 billion. You know, as well, for different classes of herbicides, you know, basically what crops they apply to. You know what the costs are. You could probably make some good estimates as to what a herbicide that did had a certain spectrum, or if it was a herbicide that was used for total vegetative control, you can put a number on that. I mean, glyphosate is a good example for a herbicide that's total vegetative control. But what's the value of the spin out? Well, that's quite hard, right? So if as a university, you own 20% of it when it starts, you don't know what that's going to be. You know, and you can see the investors as they invest. Now, interestingly, as the investors invest, you know how much money's come in. And you know, because that's all worked out through the capitalization table for each round, you can work out who owns what shares. And then you can get a value. You do get a value for the entity as it goes through those different rounds. And then, of course, when it sells, right? So if Moatech was to be bought by Corteva, they paid a price for it, we would know, Oxford would know before that happened, you know, how much of the company Oxford University had owned and what the equity was. But essentially the market in the end values those assets, because in the end, the market says, okay, I've looked at Moatech, they've got 5 different candidate herbicides. They all do slightly different things, but we are valuing and we want to purchase the company at, you know, whatever that value is. So even though you think something is not really that easy to put a value on, in the end, the market does it for you.
Great, great. Simon, I'd love to maybe perhaps using a bit of your experience as CSO at Oxitec, can you explain what sort of traits are necessary for an innovator or someone who wants to be a founder and take their innovation from lab to market? There's certainly a lot of skill sets that come into play with tech transfer, and perhaps partnering is the way to go to have people of different expertise. But what's your experience for this?
Oh, for a minute there, when you said what sort of traits, I was thinking you're going to ask me about the genetic traits and ask me to draw the wiring diagram of the DNA that we put in there. But no, yeah, I know what you mean. What would I say there? I mean, I've always been very passionate about life science. I did spend an awful long time with Syngenta, really interested in how agriculture works, how crop protection works, and the new technologies and what differences they make. So I think actually having a real passion for the thing that the area that you're in is really important, because you have to get up Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock, and work till 5 on it. But as an innovator and somebody that's trying to take something that you believe in and you got passion in, and you can see the future, or you've got a vision for the future, and you know how it will help the world, the people, but you know that everyone around you is looking at it as if it's like something crazy that's come out of the lab, or something crazy that somebody just thought about one day on a farm. And then you've got to prove that it's not crazy, but not only is it not crazy, that it really will work. And then thirdly, not that it only really will work, but it's actually worth investment. And that's quite tough, because as you go out and try and find investment, a lot of investors will say no to you, and they'll say no, it's either too risky, it doesn't fit their portfolio, they don't like you and your leadership team. There's many reasons to say no. So essentially being resilient, surrounding yourself with good people, being credible, being honest, talking about risk and benefit in a proper way. Never be a snake oil salesperson. Generally, when you work in your own organization, you know the potential of what you have, you know the risks, but actually, when you talk credibly to investors about how you're going to manage the risk, they're much more engaged than if you tell them it's risk-free, just give us some money, and all we need to do then is scale it up, and we could be selling a product in 2 days. And the other thing I think is really important is to maintain a sensible, balanced life, spend time with your friends and family, because if you don't, you'll burn out, and it will be to no one's benefit. So even if you're in an organization that requires you to work really hard, it's really important just to keep your own sense of balance in good stead.
David, if you want to provide some last thoughts on how you see this in CGIAR, I think that would be a great note to close this discussion on.
Okay, thank you, Megan, and also again, thank you, Simon, for your very thorough presentation. I think I know there are so much elements on that you do, and it's incredible. So hopefully we can have a little more time in the future to explore in addition what all the things that you do. But I think that in general terms, that as I said in the beginning, I think that considering the nature of Oxford University, consider that they want to generate impact, I think that we are very well aligned on what the CG centers want to do, where that we really want to just not do research for the sake of doing research, but doing it for really generating an impact in people's lives. This is why we're here. And I think Simon's presentations gives us, a broader perspective of how can we use our research. How can we materialize that in something that really works for people? And of course, taking advantage, in this case, of the legal instruments that most jurisdictions that we work with, that they provide us, and how can we use them in our type of organizations, if we decide to go through a patent, if we decide to maybe partnership with a private or public companies, always keeping in mind what are the guiding principles on how we manage our assets in the case of the CG centers. So thank you again, Simon, for joining us and for all what you have shared today.
Pleasure. No, thank you very much. Actually, enjoyed it. And any follow-up questions, I'm sure Megan can direct them at me. I did try and answer a quick one to Judith, who asked a very interesting question about people being opposed to life science and why did Oxford publish the framework. But we did that. Transparency, it's key, right? So anyway, short answer there. No, thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'll be sure to source any final questions and connect them to our speakers here, but I really think that's a great note to leave the conversation with. So thank you again to Simon Warner of Oxford University Innovation and to David Rodriguez Machado of the Alliance and CGIAR for helping us raise this really important conversation through today's Venture Out event. Before you go, I'd now like to introduce the Senior Director of CGIAR's Private Partnerships for Impact Unit, Remy Beton, to provide some closing remarks on the work being done within the Private Partnerships for Impact Unit to ensure that tech transfer accelerates CGIAR's vision for a food secure future.
Thank you, Megan, for this introduction, and thank you for this excellent opportunity to introduce a new department of CGIAR, which is called Private Partnership for Impact. I myself come from one of the CG centers, IRI, and I was for the last few years head of IRI Tech Transfer, in charge at IRI of private sector engagement, and also in charge of the strategic management of intellectual property. And basically this new department, Private Partnership for Impact, is there to contribute to maximize the impact of CG science-based innovations and to create new opportunities to scale knowledge, research outcome, and innovations. I've been extremely interested by the interaction today in the seminar, and especially, of course, some IP questions, and especially also what Simon said about the need for passion. So everything we do at PP4I, just the same as with the CGIAR, we do with passion. And our passion is focused on leaving this world in a better position thanks to our activity. So this passion is translated in PP4I in terms of helping our clients. And we have basically two types of clients at PP4I. Internal clients, CG centers, CG initiatives, and also scientists working at the CG that have questions around IP and around innovation. And we have also, hopefully, the CGIAR has hopefully interaction with quite a lot of innovators that would like to know about new opportunities offered by the CGIAR. So just for our internal clients, what we can do for them is basically being an internal center of expertise. So if you have questions about private sector engagement, about the management of intellectual property and other topics, please come to us. We'd like very much to interact with you. I'd like to give you some examples of active files that we are working on together with our colleagues. Those include, for example, together with genetic innovation, the development of best practices for commercial licensing of varieties developed by the CGIAR. I don't want to reveal everything about management of IP, but one thing that is nice about intellectual property is that if you have an asset, you can give the same asset for free to public partners, but the same asset can be given with some strings attached to private partners. And that's the beauty of intellectual property. It is a leverage on the way to getting the impact that you want. We are working also together with genetic innovation in terms of in-licensing key and emerging technologies, making sure that the best possible technologies that sometimes are owned by private companies are available not only to CG researchers, but also to our stakeholders in NARES partners, and of course, made available to the final users of those new products. So we need to discuss with the private sector, and when we discuss with the private sector, we probably need to have some kind of currency that we can exchange, right? So if we have IP they want, and if they have IP we need, that makes for intelligent discussions. So more on that, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Remy.
And I'm sorry, the time is short, but I'm very happy about this opportunity. Let's continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Absolutely. The dialogue will certainly continue. You can reach out to innovations@cgiar.org after the event for more information to follow up on these questions and learn more about PP4I and, of course, the Accelerate for Impact platform that brought you this event today. So join us this spring as Venture Out Events continues. We'll venture more into the tech transfer conversation and invite some more guests for the innovation ecosystem to explore lessons for supporting science to deliver value. So thanks again to all of our speakers. Thank you to our audience, and see you all next time.